Welcome to Ministries That Podcast, where I talk to successful ministry leaders about how they're using podcasting to amplify their mission and grow their ministry so you can too. I'm Tim Hull, your host and owner of Sonimorphic, a podcast production company that specializes in podcasting for ministries. For this last episode of the year, I'm going to be highlighting some of the best podcast advice and favorite moments shared on Ministries That Podcast in 2025. Now, before we jump into these clips, I just want to share an update on Ministries That Podcast as we head into the new year. So for 2026, I'm going to keep the same 2 10-episode seasons approach, and I'm planning to kick off season 4 in March. Then, like this year, there'll be a break in the summer before I come back in the fall with a second season of 10 episodes, which will end right before the holidays, roughly. This publishing frequency has been more sustainable for me and my business, so I'm going to do it again next year. And speaking of the business, I'm really excited about the coming year for Sonimorphic. We recently started working with Nat Theo, a fantastic podcast for kids and parents alike, where master naturalist, Bible teacher, and author Aaron Lynham shares nature lessons exploring God's wild and wonderful world. I'll include a link in the show notes for you to go check it out. And then we're working on launching Daily Scripture with Tim Wildsmith that starts on January 1st. It's a daily podcast where pastor, writer, and Bible teacher Tim Wildsmith is going to read through the entire Bible, reading passages from the Old Testament, New Testament, and Psalms or Proverbs every day. I'm really excited about this new show. You can go listen to the trailer right now, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. We're also continuing to work with great shows like Compelled, She Reads Truth podcast, and the official Adventures in Odyssey podcast. All right, well, that's the update on 2026 and what's coming up. But now, let's look back on 2025. So here's what you can expect out of today's episode. I'm going to be highlighting 9 clips from this year's episodes. First, I'll give a little context about the guest and the clip, and then I'll play the clip. Then after that clip finishes, I'll jump back in, transition us to the next clip, and just keep repeating that rhythm until we get through all 9 clips. So to start us off, we've got Natalie Abbott. She's the co-founder and chief content officer of Dwell Differently and host of the Dwell Differently podcast. Natalie was my guest on episode 38, and in this clip, she shares how they've grown their podcast through social media, having great guests, and being a guest on other podcasts. I would love to know as well, as you think about the social clips specifically, and you're using podcast clips, and we talked about this a little bit, but maybe there's some additional stuff to throw out here too. But you have a following of over 280,000 folks on Instagram, and I'm sure, you're putting out various content, but the podcast content has been a key piece of that. So I'd love to know, how has the podcast content helped continue to engage your audience in a way that if you didn't have the podcast, you would have to figure out something else to do? Basically, how has it been able to create content for you to be able to put in front of your following?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Again, I think especially the guest episodes are relatively easy in terms of the amount of time that it takes to put into something. Yeah. So, we write 4 devotionals, 4 to 5 every month, and we have 4 to 5 podcast episodes. And the simplest content that we put out is the guest podcast episode where I'm simply getting to have a really great, engaging conversation. I look forward to it. It's very life-giving to me. Whereas if I'm writing a devotional, especially the first devotional is always a teaching heavy devotional. That involves a lot of research. And I mean, realistically, I would be doing that research, I suppose, either way. But in terms of bang for your buck, I feel like those 3 application podcast episodes specifically, it's I've already done the hard work. I already know what this verse is about. I'm really excited about these concepts, and I've been thinking about it, I've been marinating on it. And now I get to have a conversation with somebody about it. And not only that, but when I put that episode up there, people are like, oh my gosh, I love Tara-Leigh Cobble. I follow Tara-Leigh Cobble. And she reposted on her site, and all these people come and they want to know more. And so it's sort of almost like an advertising for what we're doing when we partner with people in that way. And more beautiful because it's a better representation of God's people. And it allows the whole of the body to continue to speak in a way that I think is poignant and it's pointed. It's exactly focused in on the one thing that we are doing that's different than what other podcasts are doing. And it's good to have all these varieties, but for our podcast, we're talking about this one verse and we're talking about it all month long.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something really powerful about taking God's word and kind of putting it under the microscope in that way and allowing it to really sink in and to saturate into our lives. So that's the hope with the podcast. That's why we keep doing it. And also because I love it personally. It's really fun.
Yeah. And would you say then that that's the best way that you found to help grow your podcast audience is just having great guests on the show? Has there been anything else that you've been like, man, that really helped get the podcast in front of more people?
I would say actually showing up on other people's podcasts is helpful. So again, that whole networking thing of being in relationship with other people who are kind of doing the same thing is really helpful because if they're hosting a podcast, more than likely they're going to invite you to be on their podcast and you're going to talk about the fact that you have a podcast and the people who are listening to that episode are like, oh, I kind of like that girl. I'm going to go listen to her podcast. And I would say that's one really helpful way of sort of getting the word out. The social media posts for sure is another way of getting the word out. And yeah, the book, the Bible study, I think if you have a good podcast and it goes along with what you're doing, people are going to listen to it. At least your audience is going to listen to it. It may not be that the whole wide world wants to listen to your podcast. Like not everybody wants to listen to my podcast, and that's totally fine. But the people that I'm serving, that God has called me to serve in the way that I'm serving, it makes sense. And so it may be that somebody listening to this episode is like, well, I'm a principal at a high school and I want to be able to speak to the students that I'm serving and their families. And it would be helpful for me to be able to have a podcast where I can just kind of tell them, this is why I'm doing this. This is what I think about that. It can be whatever you want it to be, essentially. It's a platform that is allowing you to speak to your audience. And whoever that is, it might be the right thing. It might be the best thing, but it doesn't have to look like any other podcast. Like if I went out and tried to find a scripture memory podcast and tried to imitate it, there isn't one. So whatever it is that you're doing and whoever your ideal audience is, that's who you want to reach and that's who you're serving. Because ultimately, hopefully, if this is a Christian podcast that you're doing, you're not trying to make a bunch of money. You're not trying to come up with some great idea that everybody wants. You're trying to serve God's people and you're trying to live out your calling. And whatever your specific calling is, whatever it is that you are called to do and the people you are called to minister to, if you have a podcast, it's for them.
Up next is Ginger Hubbard. She's a best-selling author, speaker, and co-host of Parenting with Ginger Hubbard. Ginger was my guest on episode 39, and in this clip, she shares how they were able to get sponsors before they even started the podcast and didn't even have listeners yet. Tell me a little bit about, as you started, because I scrolled back to the beginning and you did have sponsors for the very first episode. And so I'd love to know how you had relationships, how you got some of those deals going before you even had basically a proof of an audience size at that point.
Well, we knew from the start that we wanted to have sponsors, and we wanted that to be a regular part of our show right out of the gate. We didn't want that to be, to where we're just giving content with no ad breaks and then suddenly, introduce that to our listeners. We were afraid that might be a bit frustrating. Plus, Katie and I both were very routine people. So we wanted to go ahead and, again, come out of the gate with the routine that we wanted to have. Yeah. But you're right. We had no listenership. I mean, we had not even aired the first episode when we started reaching out to those sponsors. We just knew that we wanted to have them. So we did three things. First, we reached out to really small companies with resources that we personally used and loved and truly had a passion to tell others about. We were actually already telling people about them, just friends. And so we reached out to those, and then we charged them like next to nothing. We really shouldn't have even charged them, but we just wanted to start out doing it right. So I think
Yeah.
we charged them like $20, something crazy. And so very little for them to do that. And then Katie wrote the ads that we would be using on the podcast, using very personal endorsements for their products or whatever the resource was, and then often using a touch of humor so that the ads were really engaging and fun. And then here's the kicker, Tim. Having said all that, I think what really got those sponsors for us is Katie went ahead and recorded the ads. And so on that initial email where we even reached out to them and said, hey, we love your products. We want to tell about your products. And we know we don't have a listenership yet because we're a brand new podcast, but we're not going to charge, hardly anything. We're really expecting this to grow. And then Katie went ahead and sent a link to the ad that she had already recorded. And she is just brilliant with that stuff. She's very clever. She's very humorous. And she's just very captivating in the way that she communicates. And so she would create the ads. They would click play, probably half of them thinking, yeah, whatever. These people haven't even started. And her ads were so brilliant and so clever and so engaging that I think I can honestly say I don't think one person rejected our ads. They were just that good. Plus, another thing that we told them is the way that we do our ads for our sponsorships is they're evergreen. And so we said, we don't have a listenership now, but we're really committed to this and we're really hoping to grow that listenership. And so as we gain new listeners, they're going to go back and listen to our earlier episodes, hopefully. And so your ads are going to be evergreen. So, you're paying $20 now for this ad, but hopefully one day we're going to have, millions of listeners and they're going to like what they're hearing and they're going to go back and listen to some of these older episodes. And then you've got, an ad that you might have paid thousands of dollars for that you only paid $20 because you got in on the ground floor. So that's how we got sponsors without having a listenership.
All right, up next is Garrett Hampton. He's a movie industry veteran as a motion control technician who later directed the documentary Schoolhouse Rocked, The Homeschool Revolution, and is currently producer of the Schoolhouse Rocked and Homeschool Insights podcasts. Garrett was my guest on episode 43, and in this clip, he shares great advice on going from audio only to a video podcast. So at what point did you decide to go from the audio-only format to video and add the added layer?
Yeah, it was pretty early on. And because we were at a kind of the early part of the curve for this type of podcast, we were able to really grow naturally. At the time we brought video in, not everybody was doing video podcasts.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we started out with a Logitech webcam, right? We bought a whatever their 1080p webcam was. And we put some lights in the room that just lit up Yvette's face enough to not have the image be underexposed and noisy, right?
Yeah.
And that was enough. And at that time, we didn't even have the guest on the video when we started. We had a little TV behind Yvette with their face on it, and that was the show, right? That was probably 6 months into the podcast, I would guess. It's hard to say, but it was pretty early on. And then we just grew naturally from there. Now I would tell people it's kind of a double-edged sword. It is an expectation that video is a part of a podcast, at least for social media. It's almost impossible to promote podcasts now without some video for social media. But the other side of that is the standard is pretty high now. People have seen a lot of hours of like Twitch streamers and stuff like that. And they realize that in a small space, you can get a really nice camera and a few flat panel LED lights and have it look pretty good. And so my encouragement would be to people is hold off until you can do it right. Because I think doing it poorly really shoots yourself in the foot. And the truth is you can produce really good quality, professional looking video for not a ton of money. It doesn't have to be, tens of thousands of dollars. But you do have to invest in it. I think nobody truly understands the level of work that it takes to do a video podcast until they're like 3 episodes in and they're like, oh my goodness, we have to do this every week, forever. It's a crazy amount of work. It's one thing to get cameras set up and get those social media clips. But if you do a video only podcast, it's a whole different level.
Yeah.
And so I'd really encourage people to hold off on that until you've got a team in place or you've got, the time to really do this full time and dedicate to it, because it's just a whole new animal.
Next up is Hunter Belis. She's the founder and host of Journeywoman and the author of 3 children's books and a Bible study with Courtney Doctor on the book of Titus. Hunter was my guest on episode 44, and in this clip, we talk about podcast strategy on YouTube and social media to grow awareness for your show. As you might know, YouTube now is like the number one place that people find new podcasts. Do you have a strategy over there that you've decided?
No.
Or social video? Like, what does that look like as far as like sawdust content from the podcast to garner awareness?
We need to consider YouTube more heavily. I think there's just been a lot of different things that we've thought about in terms of editing and time and energy and all of that. So if you take something from audio to video, it makes it so much more challenging to edit. And we've just been facing the increasing challenge of, as every woman on the team, her family kind of grows and changes, then the margin hours and all of that have decreased. And so for us, we're just really trying to stabilize. But I think that'd be a wonderful way to grow if you have the time, energy, and effort. I'm feeling a little bit of my geriatric millennial status because YouTube just feels like this whole unknown territory. But I do think that'd just be a wonderful way to grow. And it's hard, I think, when you're starting off, right? Like I just posted this little Instagram video and tagged you in it. And it's me in my closet because that's where I podcast. I podcast in my closet. It doesn't look like it right now because I've got my drawers behind me and stuff. But we don't have a fancy studio. And we don't have the funding to have a fancy studio. We don't have the funding to be able to fly guests out like some of the other bigger ministries that are now podcasting in addition to having big conferences and all of these different things. So I think I just have to remind myself, like, just because I can't do it that way doesn't mean it can't be done. And so even with YouTube, I probably need to humble myself and consider what my options are, just not having access to the beautiful studio that everybody has, or it seems as though everybody has, and things like that. So anyways, that's something for us to consider. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Because what I was talking to, Ginger Hubbard, I think it was not too long ago on the show.
Wonderful.
And she had done some social video stuff and then they stopped doing it because the very reason you're saying, like, I think, and she was specifically saying like she was making additional video content to help promote the podcast. And video, I was just talking to another guy that their show is video first. And it does take at least 3x of the time and energy and effort to do a video podcast.
Yeah.
And to do it well. But what I recommend to people that are getting started in podcasting or have been doing it for a long time and haven't added a video element is, like, if you're already capturing on a platform like Riverside, like we're using, and you can capture video, then it's really pretty simple to then go in and just cut clips and throw those out. And then, like, I don't edit the full video episode of my podcast because it does take a lot of time to do, but I put up the full episode with just a graphic. And so then at least it's sitting there. And if it comes across people,
that's smart.
Then it's there. And now you might know this too
smart.
already, that YouTube added RSS integration. So you can actually sign up for them to just already import your RSS feed and start surfacing it that way.
That's incredible. And as this really became a part of the conversation, like a couple of years ago, I think a lot of people started really utilizing YouTube more and more on the heels of COVID, all of this. I don't think at that point in my podcasting journey, my speaking journey, my personal development, I wasn't ready to be on video. Like, you and I both have talked about the prep work prior to podcasts and all of that. I used to lean really heavy on my notes. Now I'm very comfortable with having a more organic conversation. But I think I'd be at a point where I'm ready to do that now. But it's taken 7 years.
This next clip is with Erin Lynham. She's a master naturalist, Bible teacher, author, and host of the podcast, Nat Theo, Nature Lessons Rooted in the Bible. Erin was my guest on episode 46, and in this clip, she shares how she's grown her podcast audience through free resources, speaking at conferences, and guesting on other podcasts. So, what are some ways that as you've gone to conferences or you've been on other podcasts, you've written other books since then as well, what are some other ways that you've been able to grow the podcast audience?
I would say that email list is really big.
Okay.
And one way we've grown that is this was key. I had no idea how key this would be when I started doing this. But when we started the club, part of the curriculum every week is a coloring sheet. And it's actually like a 17-page activity guide they get every week. But one part of that is a coloring sheet. And I just decided, why don't we just give the coloring sheet to everyone? And so every weekly lesson has a free coloring sheet available in the show notes. And they have to opt in to my email list to get that. And so I get new email subscribers every single day from these coloring sheets. And then those people become faithful listeners and subscribers, and a lot of them become club members. And so that's just a natural way that I've built the email list, which then just builds the podcast listenership. But yeah, another big way has been conferences, doing booths, but whenever you can, speaking. And, just sharing your message, sharing your heart, sharing your passion up there on stage. For me, a big one is homeschool conferences. That's one we did this past weekend. And you're just growing, basically the conferences, they're gathering all the people for you. So you go speak to them. And the same with guesting on other podcasts. They have gathered the listenership. So go and share your message instead of trying to gather everyone yourself, which is crazy hard, like on social media and everything's so loud there. Take advantage of the audiences that other people have grown by offering them value and asking to guest. And when you do that, have a professional one sheet. I mean, professional, I say, I just made mine in Canva, but make it super easy for them. Like, hey, I would love to share on your show. Here's what I have to offer. And just getting a lot of exposure that way.
All right, up next is Ruth Cho Simons. She's a best-selling and award-winning author of several books and Bible studies, an artist, speaker, and the founder of Grace Laced, and the host of the Ruth Cho Simons podcast. Ruth was my guest on episode 47, and in this clip, she shares how podcasting has built trust and an intimacy with her audience. What are some opportunities that have come up that you don't know as you would have had otherwise if you didn't have a podcast?
One of the things that I love most is that now when I speak at events and at women's conferences and I'm, there's a book signing line and women are lined up and they come and meet me, I hear so often now, oh, I've been listening to your podcast. It's like listening, now that I'm talking to you, it's like I already know you, because that's really, I would say, my number one reason right now for podcasting is because I don't want anyone to ever only experience the perfectly curated Instagram post or the perfectly edited book, because the real woman behind that book that is perfectly edited and gorgeous is messy and awkward, and English is her second language. And there's a lot going on in my life that I can't always explain unless I just have a face-to-face encounter. And the reality is, I think I'm better in an intimate and more personal setting. I don't think I'm meant for the stage, and I don't think I'm necessarily some person who wants a lot of distance. By necessity, I have distance. But my point is, when somebody meets me and says, I know your voice, I think that's the best thing. That's the best thing in the world, when someone in the moments where they're discouraged have heard me awkwardly share something and they felt encouraged. Well, now I feel like, okay, the best we can do on this side of eternity is to use a medium like podcasting, where somebody's voice and their heart and their tone and maybe even their vulnerability comes through, because you can't always read that, but you can hear it.
Next up is Will and Miki Addison. They're the creators behind the podcast and YouTube channel Culture Proof, where they practically equip Christians to resist cultural trends that rival the truth. They were my guests on episode 49, and in this clip, Miki and Will share the importance of not chasing views and listens and going viral. what were some of those things that you know now that you're like, man, I wish we would have implemented this back when we started? Or, what are some things that you're shaking your head? Well, what are you thinking right now?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing is kind of what I said, because YouTube, like Miki said, was just a link somebody sent you to see a funny video. And I didn't really process these people are making these videos and they're going viral and things are happening.
And they're earning a living off of this.
That didn't even enter my mind that, man, they can pay for these videos. Like what?
I look back on the years that we had in radio and we had so much fun. I feel like we have fun in podcasting, but I really honestly feel like, if I could be completely transparent, I feel like we're still trying to catch our stride.
Yeah.
Like I feel like we still don't understand how it works. You know what I mean?
We're still really young.
And
honestly.
2 years,
Like,
podcasting and having it on YouTube. I mean, I don't know. One of the things I refuse to do, because we didn't do it in radio, which I know makes me sound like a dinosaur, but like I refuse to chase the views. I refuse to chase the listens because I feel like it's so inauthentic. Like, so we can do a podcast episode where we talk about Candace Owens not pushing back on a guest who says that Protestantism is rooted in Satanism, that it comes out of Satanism. So we can do a podcast episode on that because like I care about that, right? So that's just me being me. Like I'm like, wait, hold up a second. Let's sit down and talk about this, Candy. Like, you know what I'm saying? And then that video gets like 20,000 plus views on YouTube. And you're just like, wait, what happened? Like, okay, so do we get in the pocket? Oh, we're in algorithm done found us. And so you're like, yes, let's go. And then you just do your next video and you're like, oh, that's it? We just have 100 people watching? Is that it? Oh, okay. So
discouraging.
They have banished us to the Isle of Patmos. Like, what are we doing? Like,
Man.
So then the temptation though, is that you're like, what was it? Was it Satanism? Was it Protestantism? It was Candace. So then the temptation is like, okay, what's the latest that we have on her? What's she doing? Because the views feel like success. But I'm committed to the success being everything that we do for the glory of God.
Amen.
We do because Jesus is worthy. Because like he wants to go public through us, right? Do you know what I mean? Like we're not chasing the views, which I think if you kind of cut your teeth on podcasting and content creating, then you're just thinking about what's going to give you that virality. Like what's going to be the thing that's going to put you on the map. But that's not where we cut our teeth. We cut our teeth on really caring about the issues and communicating that through a biblical lens and trying to teach the body of Christ to discern truth, like to know what the culture is pushing and to be able to reject it.
And I'll just say this real quick.
No, go ahead.
Because that's the heart right there that we have. And I know, so when my conflict comes in, I know that there's strategy. I know that there's certain ways you can learn how to use these platforms, and there are certain things, but I don't want to be to the point of like chasing after, like just talking about stuff because it's popular. This is what's going to get the views. But I know that there is a strategy to be able to have your content and find your audience. Yeah. And that's where I am now. I'm like, we're looking for our people.
Yeah. What's the
we know that they're out there, but it's like to where they would love this content that we're bringing and consistently watch and listen.
This next clip is with Holly Mackle. She's a classical school librarian, the author of several books, and the host of the podcast Unseriously. Holly was my guest on episode 51, and in this clip, she shares why editing is so important for your listeners. In the episode with Hunter Beles, you talked about editing your own podcast and discovering vocal quirks as you get started doing that. What are one or two that you still frequently find yourself editing out?
This is so embarrassing. I am a repeater. It's so annoying. I can't just say, that's cool. I'm more likely to say, that's cool, so cool. And I don't know how to fix this. I think I'm probably just too old for it. But beyond that, I'm also an interrupter. And I can give myself a little bit more grace on the interruption scale because as an enthusiastic person, it's something I do in real life normally. But in real life, you have the ability to see a person's face and to sort of read facial, expressions and things like that. That doesn't come off necessarily as well.
in a podcast. And my friend Elizabeth Santelman from Sunshine in My Nest, one of the first pieces of advice she gave me was to say that the single most important person in the conversation is the person that you cannot see. It's the listener. And so when you are trying to listen without any visual feedback to something, I find that interruptions are really frustrating. And I actually often don't listen to podcasts that really have a lot of interrupting because it frustrates me. And so because I'm doing the editing, I have the ability to edit myself and the guest to make us sound like the most polite people in the entire world. And so I have no struggles interrupting on my podcast episodes like I do in real life. So yeah, fix it on edit is my trick.
All right, and our final clip is with Carlos Whitaker. In addition to being a podcast host, he's an author, speaker, and storyteller, bringing hope to humans all over the world by cultivating spaces where people are free to engage in genuine dialogue and do good together. Carlos was my guest on episode 53, and in this clip, he shares why editing was interrupting the joy in his life and led him to hire an editor. At the beginning, you were editing your own show and doing all of that. And then you mentioned you're working with an editor now. What made you decide, hey, now's the time to kind of switch from doing all the things myself to, hey, I need to get somebody else helping with this?
Yeah, I think it was, I finally just hit the wall. I think it was 2 a.m. one Wednesday night where I'm just like in GarageBand, like moving things over. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. And I did that, bro, for like 4 years. It was me. Like it was just me. And then I was like, editor's gonna be so expensive and I don't know. And bro, it was the greatest decision I've ever made. Like I just was like, so hold on. You're telling me I'm just gonna talk into this thing and then upload it to Dropbox and poof, it's gone. And someone else is gonna take care of the whole thing. And yes, there's great tools, obviously, like you do this for a living. Like there's tools that help you do it faster now. But I got to the place where it was interrupting the joy in my life. And it wasn't podcasting that was doing it. It was the editing that was doing it. And so, and I am also very, like when I had a podcast called Enter Wild. I was probably made it 5 episodes. And I loved editing. Like I loved it. Like it was almost like a This American Life episode. Okay. Like I had I was scoring it. I had soundtracks. I had it was awesome. Like all 5 of those episodes were like a big story, and it was so exhausting. But I loved it, and I was like, I didn't have a single ad at that point, so I wasn't getting paid, and so it was just taking so much time. And what I realized is, I guess the best bang for my buck is let me get what God has placed in me out, and then have somebody else put it all together, stitch it all together for me.
Yeah. What a great year it's been as we've learned so much from ministry leaders about how they're using podcasting to amplify their mission and grow their ministry. You can listen to each episode mentioned in today's episode with the links in the show notes. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Ministries That Podcast, produced by Sonimorphic. If you enjoyed today's episode, follow or subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend. That's the best way to get the word out, so together we can help more ministries grow and thrive through podcasting. Now come back for season 4 in March. But until then, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and keep encouraging your audience as they follow Jesus.